The senator thought it was just another softball press conference until one reporter asked a single question that froze the entire room. The cameras are flashing. The senator steps up to the podium, smiling with the practiced ease of someone who has done this 1,000 times. He leans into the microphone, delivering the same polished talking points he always does. His tone drips with overconfidence, his grin unshakable. The audience, journalists, aides, onlookers nod politely, many expecting nothing more than another routine exchange. But then silence. One reporter doesn't lower their hand. Instead, with calm persistence, they're given the floor. The question is not long, not loaded, but devastating in its simplicity. It cuts straight to the heart of the senator's record, exposing contradiction, hypocrisy, and truth that cannot be spun away. The senator freezes. His grin flickers. He tries to chuckle, but the sound dies in his throat. Cameras zoom in. The smirk fades. For the first time, the man who commands the room is on the defensive. The audience senses it too. Gasps ripple through the press gallery. Typing becomes furious as journalists realize they're witnessing not a press conference but a takedown. The senator fumbles for words, his rehearsed lines slipping like sand through his fingers. The question, simple yet sharp, lingers in the air. He cannot escape it, and in that silence his power crumbles. Cliffhanger. But what came after wasn't just one man's stumble. It was a moment that revealed how fragile political arrogance can be when faced with truth. Purpose. Build context around why this question mattered so much. Show the senator's arrogance, the public frustration, and set up why the confrontation feels like justice. The scene after the opening silence grows heavier by the second. The senator clears his throat, buying time, but everyone in the room can see what just happened. His armor of confidence has been pierced. To understand why this single question struck so deeply, we need to step back. For weeks, even months, the senator has strutted through press conferences unchallenged. Every appearance followed the same script: bold claims, empty slogans, and carefully crafted lines delivered with the smug certainty of someone who believed no one dared confront him. The media played along, often tossing him softballs that allowed his bravado to shine. His team called it commanding the narrative. His critics called it manipulation. But either way, it had worked until today. Because today, one reporter refused to play the game. This wasn't just any reporter. Their reputation was built on persistence, on asking the questions others were too afraid or too compromised to ask. They had studied the senator's speeches, his voting record, his contradictions. They knew the exact weak spot, the point of hypocrisy that would unravel the illusion of strength. And they waited for the perfect moment. When the senator tried to paint himself as a champion of accountability, that was the trigger. The reporter's voice cut through the chatter, calm but firm. "Senator, if accountability is so important to you, then how do you explain your vote against the very policy you're promoting today?" It was surgical. No grandstanding, no theatrics. Just a single, undeniable contradiction laid bare. The question landed like a thunderclap. Everyone in the room knew the facts. The senator had spoken out against this policy months earlier. He had stood on the Senate floor thundering against it. Yet here he was, smiling at the cameras, pretending to be its biggest advocate. That is why the moment felt electric. It wasn't just about a political flip-flop. It was about exposure. It was about truth cutting through spin. It was about watching arrogance meet accountability live on camera. The senator's smirk, once his signature, suddenly looked like a mask slipping. His voice wavered. He shuffled through notes. His carefully rehearsed talking points had no answer to a question this raw, this direct. The stakes were no longer just about his press conference. They were about credibility, about trust, about the viral clip that was already racing across the internet seconds after the words were spoken. And deep down, everyone in that room and soon across the nation knew this was the beginning of something bigger. Cliffhanger. But before the country saw him stumble, they had to understand the story behind the man whose smirk once seemed uncheckable. Purpose. Show the senator's arrogance, contradictions, and history of dismissing critics. Build him up as the villain so his stumble feels inevitable and satisfying. The senator was not always a household name. Years ago, he was a local politician, climbing quietly, calculating every move. But somewhere along the way, calculation turned into arrogance. Success inflated his sense of invincibility. By the time he reached national prominence, he carried himself less like a public servant and more like an untouchable king. Reporters who covered him in those early days recall a man who enjoyed the spectacle of politics more than the service of it. He loved the lights, the cameras, the attention. He knew how to deliver a line that would trend online. And he perfected the smirk, the half-smile that told voters, rivals, and journalists alike, "I am smarter than you. I am untouchable." But behind the smirk were contradictions, layer upon layer of them. When speaking to wealthy donors, he championed policies that benefited corporations. When standing in town halls, he suddenly became a man of the people, railing against those very same elites. He shifted positions like costumes, wearing whichever identity suited the audience of the day, and it worked. For years, people bought into the performance. His supporters praised him as clever, even cunning. They said his opponents simply could not keep up with his wit. Critics, however, saw something different, a politician who believed rules were for everyone else, not him. One moment in particular revealed his true character. During a heated floor debate, a younger colleague challenged his stance. Instead of engaging with the substance of the argument, the senator leaned back, smirked, and muttered just loud enough for cameras to catch, "You are not ready for this stage." The chamber erupted in gasps. His supporters cheered his bravado. His critics saw it as pure arrogance. Moments like that defined his career. They built the myth of a senator who could not be rattled. But they also sowed the seeds of resentment. Every time he dismissed a question, dodged an answer, or belittled an opponent, he added pressure to the fault line beneath him. Then came the contradiction that would haunt him, the policy flip. Months earlier, he had thundered against it on national television, calling it a disaster waiting to happen. His speech was clipped and shared widely. He smirked then, too, certain his words would age well. But politics is a stage where yesterday's script can quickly turn into today's evidence. When he reversed course and suddenly became the loudest champion of that same policy, people noticed. His critics saved the clips, journalists marked the shift, and the reporter who confronted him studied every detail. To the senator, it was just another performance. He believed the cameras would smooth over the past, that the public had short memories. What he failed to realize was that his arrogance had made people watch him more closely, not less. The smirk, once a symbol of confidence, had become a symbol of hypocrisy. It represented a man who could not be questioned, who believed charm was stronger than truth. And that is why the reporter's question cut so deep. It wasn't just about one policy. It was about years of contradictions crashing down in a single moment. The senator, who once thrived on spectacle, had finally become the spectacle himself. Cliffhanger. But if the senator's downfall seemed inevitable, the real story was the unlikely figure who stood across from him, the one person prepared to pierce the armor of arrogance. Purpose. Build the hero, the reporter. Show their persistence, personal sacrifices, and why they were uniquely suited to confront the senator. Create empathy, admiration, and anticipation. Long before the lights of the Capitol hearing room, long before their questions shook the senator to his core, the reporter was just another voice in the crowd, unnoticed, underestimated, and often ignored. They began their career in small-town journalism. No glossy studio sets, no million-dollar contracts. Just a battered notebook, a camera that barely worked, and a relentless hunger for truth. In those early days, they covered school board meetings, zoning disputes, and the occasional town scandal. To most, it was thankless work. But to them, it was a calling. The lesson was simple. Truth matters, even when no one is watching. It was in those small rooms that they built their craft. While other reporters chased headlines, they chased patterns. When politicians made promises, they compared them against records. When officials dodged questions, they pressed harder. They were not loud, not flashy, but unshakably persistent. Persistence, after all, came naturally. Life had never handed them shortcuts. They had grown up in a working-class family where every paycheck mattered, where sacrifice was not a slogan but a way of survival. They knew what it felt like to be dismissed, to have people in power look past you as if you did not exist. That experience etched into them a quiet defiance. I will not be ignored. By the time they moved to national reporting, they had already built a reputation among colleagues. The bulldog, some called them, not because they shouted, but because they never let go. If a door closed, they found another way in. If someone lied, they found the proof. If power tried to silence them, they grew sharper, not quieter. Still, they were not naive. They knew the risks of going toe-to-toe with someone like the senator. He was a political giant, media-savvy, and adored by a loyal base. A single misstep in questioning him could mean not just embarrassment, but career suicide. Many journalists avoided direct confrontation, choosing safer paths. But for this reporter, confrontation was the point. If truth meant discomfort, so be it. Their first encounter with the senator had been years earlier at a press conference. The room was packed, reporters shouting over each other. The senator smirked, calling on familiar faces, dodging pointed questions. Then the reporter raised their hand, not loud, not aggressive, just steady. The question was precise, referencing a little-known bill buried in the senator's record. He froze for half a second before regaining his composure. His smirk returned, but something had shifted. He knew this reporter had done the homework. He dodged, of course. But the moment was logged, both by the senator and by the reporter themselves. It was not the last time their paths would cross. Over the years, the reporter built files, speeches, interviews, contradictions. They did not stalk the senator, but they studied him, the way a chess player studies an opponent. Every smirk, every dodge, every half-truth was a breadcrumb leading to an inevitable reckoning. Outside of work, the cost was real. Late nights away from family, missed birthdays, friendships strained by obsession with the next lead. At times they questioned if it was worth it. But each time they saw the senator belittle another colleague, dismiss a voter, or mock someone in a hearing, the answer came back clear: yes, it was worth it. And so, when the hearing date arrived, the one where history would be made, the reporter was not unprepared. They walked into that chamber with calm resolve, carrying not just a notebook, but years of evidence, patience, and fire. Unlike the senator, they did not crave the spotlight. They did not care about going viral or making headlines. What they wanted was simpler and, in a way, far more dangerous. They wanted truth spoken plainly, without fear. That was why, when the moment came, they did not rush. They did not stumble over words. They looked the senator directly in the eye, waited for silence, and asked the question no one else dared to ask. The question that carried the weight of years. The question that turned arrogance into silence. And in that instant, the balance of power shifted. The senator was no longer the uncheckable giant. The reporter, underestimated for so long, had become the figure everyone in the room and everyone watching at home would remember. Cliffhanger. But if the reporter's preparation was years in the making, the clash that followed unfolded in real time, with every word escalating. The tension toward a breaking point. The chamber was tense, every eye locked on the two figures. The senator, visibly unsettled by the reporter's pointed question, adjusted his tie and leaned back in his chair. For a moment, it looked as if he might ignore it, but arrogance rarely allows silence. He leaned forward, voice louder now, dripping with irritation. "Another gotcha question," he sneered. "This is why the media has no credibility. You people twist facts, ignore context, and try to score cheap points." The audience, staffers, journalists, and citizens watching from the gallery shifted uneasily. Some murmured in agreement, others frowned. The senator's words were meant to reassert dominance, to remind everyone that he was not just a politician, but a performer who thrived on spectacle. But the reporter did not flinch, no smirk, no rebuttal yet. Just calm silence. And that silence became its own weapon. The senator grew more animated. His gestures widened, his voice sharpened. He accused the reporter of bias, of pushing an agenda, of being a puppet for unnamed forces. Each insult landed with less impact than the last, because it was clear to everyone in the room what was happening. The senator was rattled. The reporter finally spoke, not to spar, but to clarify. Their voice was steady, factual, and piercing. "Senator, the record shows you voted for the bill, not once, but twice. Are you saying your own votes do not count?" The room inhaled collectively. A staffer in the back nearly dropped their pen. The senator's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to respond, but no polished soundbite appeared. Instead, he blustered, his words colliding into half-finished sentences. In desperation, he pivoted to personal attacks. "You clearly do not understand how government works. Maybe if you had actually served this country instead of sitting behind a desk," gasps filled the chamber. The insult was not only cruel, but reckless. The audience felt the weight of it, the raw attempt to belittle. The reporter, however, did not blink. And that was the moment the tension peaked. The silence after the insult was heavier than any applause could have been. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. They sensed the shift. The senator had crossed a line, and the balance was tipping further out of his favor. The reporter calmly closed their notebook, placed it on the table, and met the senator's eyes with quiet steel. "You asked if I have served, Senator? I have. And I remember what integrity looks like." The chamber froze. The senator's face flushed red. The smirk that once seemed unshakable was gone. Now he looked cornered, defensive, a man exposed by his own overconfidence. But the reporter did not press further yet. They let the words hang, letting the silence amplify the truth. It was restraint, not volume, that carried the most power. The audience knew what they were witnessing was no longer just an exchange of words. It was the unraveling of a façade. The senator, once commanding, was now scrambling. The reporter, once underestimated, was holding the room with little more than composure. Cliffhanger. And then, in less than 10 seconds, everything unraveled. The counterattack was coming, and it would be remembered as the moment the senator's defense collapsed completely. The room held its breath. The senator's insult still lingered in the air, acidic and sharp, but the silence that followed made it sting even more. His confidence, once unshakable, now looked fragile. And across from him, the reporter leaned forward, not with aggression, but with calm precision, like a surgeon about to make a single cut that changes everything. "Senator," the reporter began, voice steady, clear, and amplified by the hush of the chamber, "you have accused me of bias, of twisting facts, of not serving. But here is the truth. Your record speaks louder than your words." The gallery stiffened. Staffers leaned in. Even the moderator shifted in his seat. Something was coming, and everyone felt it. The reporter opened a folder, pulling out a single sheet of paper. It was not a stack of complicated notes. It was one page, one fact. That in itself was dramatic. The senator's long-winded defenses were about to be met with a single undeniable point. "On March 14th, the reporter continued, "you voted yes on the spending bill. On June 2nd, you voted yes again on the same provisions you now claim to oppose. And in September, just 3 months ago, you held a press conference where you called the bill, quote, a victory for working families." Those are your words, Senator. They are on record. Would you like me to play the clip? Gasps rippled across the room. The senator froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The reporter waited, letting the silence build. Then they repeated, softer this time, almost surgical in tone. "Would you like me to play the clip?" The audience shifted. Some suppressed nervous laughter. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The senator's face went pale, the earlier flush of anger draining as he realized the trap had closed. The context," he stammered. His hands fidgeted, shuffling papers that suddenly seemed meaningless. But the reporter was not finished. They leaned closer, lowering their voice in a way that forced everyone to lean in too. "Context matters, Senator, but so does consistency. And when a public servant says one thing to the cameras and does another in the chamber, that is not leadership. That is deception. And the people deserve to know the difference." The chamber erupted not with chaos, but with murmurs, whispers, the low rumble of a collective realization. Phones lit up, fingers tapping furiously to capture the moment. Clips were already being cut, captions being written. This was viral fuel, and everyone knew it. The senator tried to interrupt, but his words tangled. This is an ambush. This is unfair." But the reporter cut him off, not with anger, but with precision. "Unfair? Senator, what is unfair is telling the American people one thing on a Tuesday and voting the opposite on a Wednesday. What is unfair is asking for their trust, then betraying it behind closed doors. What is unfair is pretending integrity is optional." The gallery broke into applause. The moderator banged the gavel, calling for order, but it was too late. The energy in the room had shifted completely. The senator, once the figure of authority, now looked small, diminished not by insults, but by truth itself. And then came the final blow. The reporter did not raise their voice. They did not grandstand. They simply delivered the line that would echo across headlines, hashtags, and late-night monologues for weeks to come. Senator, the truth does not need spin. It stands on its own. And today it stands taller than you. The room exploded. Gasps, applause, even shouts filled the chamber. The senator's smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. He shuffled his papers again, desperately searching for a lifeline that was no longer there. The moderator attempted to move on, but the damage was irreversible. Every camera had captured it. Every microphone had recorded it. The clip was already making its way into the bloodstream of the internet, where outrage, vindication, and celebration would amplify it beyond anyone's control. The senator's collapse was not theatrical, it was visible. His shoulders sagged. His responses grew shorter, weaker. He glanced at his aides, who avoided his eyes. The image was indelible, a powerful man reduced to silence by a single, undeniable fact. Meanwhile, the reporter sat quietly, hands folded, the very picture of composure. They had not shouted, had not mocked, had not overplayed their hand. They had let the truth speak, and the truth had struck harder than any insult ever could. The gallery knew they had witnessed more than an exchange. They had witnessed a turning point. A moment when arrogance met its limit, when bluster collided with fact, and when dignity, quiet, unflinching dignity, proved to be the sharpest weapon of all. And outside the chamber, the ripple effect was beginning. Phones buzzed, screens lit up. The words had already escaped the room, carried into the world where millions were waiting. Cliffhanger. But what happened outside those walls, the firestorm on social media, the news coverage, the memes, the voices of ordinary people, would prove that the takedown was only the beginning. By the time the hearing adjourned, the clip was already everywhere. What had unfolded in that chamber was no longer confined to the walls of government. It had escaped through cell phone recordings, official streams, and instant uploads. Within minutes, social media feeds lit up with the moment that made the senator crumble. On Twitter, hashtags trended with the speed of wildfire. Hashtag truth over spin, hashtag mic drop moment, hashtag senator shut down. Commentators who had not even been in the room were riposting, dissecting, and amplifying the exchange. The reporter's single sentence, "The truth does not need spin, it stands on its own. And today it stands taller than you," was already immortalized in bold text across memes, GIFs, and video loops. TikTok users stitched the clip with reactions ranging from stunned silence to laughter. One viral edit overlaid dramatic music, cutting from the senator's smirk to the exact moment it vanished. Millions watched, millions shared. It was not just news anymore, it was culture. Cable networks interrupted their programming, replaying the exchange with panels of analysts. Some called it the greatest takedown in recent political memory. Others argued it exposed the deep hunger for accountability. One anchor summed it up simply. It was one sentence that stripped away years of political armor. But the most powerful reaction did not come from pundits or politicians. It came from ordinary people. On Facebook, a veteran posted, "That reporter stood taller than any senator today. Integrity is not optional," and she proved it. On Instagram, a young immigrant captioned the clip, "This is why we keep fighting." Truth still matters. On YouTube, reaction videos flooded in, each one amplifying the ripple effect. Some laughed at the senator's fumbling, others celebrated the reporter's calm composure. Even celebrities weighed in. A late-night comedian turned the line into a punchline that brought down the house. A pop star tweeted the quote with nothing but a mic drop emoji. It was no longer a political moment, it was a cultural landmark. And behind the noise, the senator's silence spoke louder than anything. His office released a statement that read like damage control. The senator remains committed to serving the people and addressing important issues, but it was too late. No carefully crafted press release could undo the image of him fumbling under pressure, exposed by his own record. The ripple effect reached beyond embarrassment. Opponents seized on it, fundraising off the clip within hours. Activists used it as proof that accountability was possible. And for many citizens disillusioned by endless political theater, it was a rare flash of authenticity, a moment when truth, however fleeting, pierced through spin. For the reporter, it was not about going viral. They had not raised their voice, not gloated, not indulged in theatrics. They had simply placed the truth on the table and let it stand. That restraint only amplified their credibility. Comment sections overflowed with admiration. Finally, someone with backbone. This is what journalism should look like. She reminded us what integrity sounds like. The hearing had ended, but the story had just begun. The senator would spend weeks trying to claw back his image, but the clip would haunt him every time he stepped into the spotlight. Reporters would cite it in future interviews, opponents would invoke it in debates, and voters would remember it when campaign season rolled around. It was more than a viral video. It was a turning point in perception. The senator's brand of arrogance had met its expiration date, and the world had watched it happen in real time. Cliffhanger. But beyond the memes and headlines, there was something deeper, an echo of a larger truth. And the reporter, in her quiet triumph, was about to show that this moment wasn't just about a senator's stumble. It was about a universal lesson America had forgotten and desperately needed to remember. When the noise began to fade after the headlines, the memes, and the endless replays, the heart of the moment revealed itself. It was not just about a senator losing his composure. It was not even about a reporter outshining a powerful figure. It was about truth. In a world drowning in spin, where carefully crafted talking points often replace honesty, that one exchange cut through the fog like sunlight breaking clouds. It reminded everyone watching that truth does not need to shout. It does not need theatrics, it simply needs to stand. The reporter's calm presence had been its own lesson. She had not interrupted, she had not grandstanded. She had waited, steady, allowing the senator's arrogance to collapse under its own weight. When she finally spoke, it was with clarity and conviction. One sentence, no wasted words, no desperation to dominate. That was the power of dignity over bluster. The contrast could not have been sharper. On one side, a politician armed with smirks, sarcasm, and spin. On the other, a journalist armed only with facts. And in that battle, facts proved stronger. Viewers who had grown weary of endless bickering suddenly saw something different. They saw a reminder that courage is quiet, that strength can be measured not by volume but by precision. That integrity, though often overlooked, still has the power to shake even the tallest pillars of arrogance. Parents shared the clip with their children, saying, "This is what it means to speak truth to power." Teachers replayed it in classrooms as an example of composure under pressure. Activists pointed to it as proof that the fight for accountability was not hopeless. The universal message was simple yet profound. Arrogance may command attention, but it cannot withstand truth. And perhaps that was why it resonated so deeply. The exchange was not just about politics, it was about life. Every viewer who had ever been belittled, dismissed, or spoken over could see themselves in the reporter. Her victory was theirs. Her calm triumph whispered to millions, "You are not powerless. The truth is your ally." That is why the clip kept spreading, long after the headlines shifted. Because at its core, it was not just news, it was a parable. A story that reminded people of a truth as old as history itself. Power can deceive, but it cannot erase reality. Lies can dominate a room, but they crumble when met with facts. In that moment, America remembered. It remembered that dignity is not weakness. It remembered that justice is not theater. It remembered that even the powerful must eventually face the truth. And for one senator, that realization arrived with devastating force, delivered not by a rival, but by a single question, a single sentence, a single moment of fearless journalism. The moral could be summed up in the line that echoed across the internet. Facts do not need to shout. They just need to stand. And on that day they stood taller than arrogance, taller than politics, taller than power itself. Closing beat. Because no matter how loud the lies, no matter how polished the spin, the truth always waits, calm, steady, unstoppable. And when the moment comes, it will not just speak. It will stand. The moment will be remembered not for the senator's smirk, not for the dodged talking points, but for the silence that followed one fearless question. Reporter's tough question shuts down the senator was not just a headline, it was a truth made visible, undeniable, unforgettable. We saw arrogance falter. We saw confidence crumble. And in its place, we saw something stronger rise, dignity, precision, and the courage to speak truth without fear. That is why this clip struck such a chord. It was not simply a debate, it was a reminder. A reminder that the truth does not bend for politics. A reminder that facts outlast performance. A reminder that, in the end, power cannot outsmile, outspin, or outshout reality. And that is why millions shared it. Because it gave them hope. Because it told them that no matter how high the walls of arrogance are built, truth always finds the cracks. Now, here's where you come in. If this moment inspired you, if it reminded you that honesty still has power, and that dignity still matters, do not let it stop here. Share this video. Subscribe to the channel. Join a growing community that believes in justice, dignity, and accountability. Because every share is more than just a click, it is a statement. Every subscription is more than just support, it is a voice in a movement. The senator may have been silenced in that moment, but the larger story is just beginning. Together, we can make sure the truth keeps standing, keeps echoing, and keeps winning. Because the powerful may smirk, they may posture, but in the end, the truth will always stand taller.